Hello. Let's see. Moderation helps everyone feel safe. Okay. Add moderators to your channel. How do I see who's watching? No one is here yet. Whoops. Okay, someone has joined me. Hello, whoever you are. Whoever you are, if you would like to say hello in the comment, in the chat thing, let me know who you are. If you want to. If not, that's okay. This is just a random live stream to invite any people who have recently subscribed to my channel. If they have any questions or concerns or objections about any of the content that they found on my channel, I want to just give them an opportunity to tell me what they think or ask or object or whatever. Probably not going to get a lot of people. It's like 4:45 on Friday. So that's actually probably a pretty bad time to do this, huh? Maybe we should do this some other time. There are 3 people here. Does anybody want to tell me? Feel free to say hello, whoever you are, in the comment thing in the chat thread or whatever. If you have anything you want to talk about, there's 0 people here. We had 3 people. We now have 0 people. My channel is not exactly setting the world on fire. Not exactly turning the world upside down. All right, we got one person. One person is back on the live stream. This live stream is just for me saying hello to recent subscribers to see if anyone has any questions or concerns or objections to any of the content on my channel. If you want to talk about it. Unfortunately, I am technically very I'm not a good with tech, so I haven't yet figured out how to bring somebody on in a live stream video chat thing. All I can do is do this, and then people can type in questions and stuff. Somebody's got to help me figure out how to do a one of those high-tech StreamYard whatever things. So there's one person here. Anything you want to talk about? Anything? Whoever you are, if you want to introduce yourself. Got any questions? Looks like crickets. Well, guess we'll just hang out. Was reading an interesting passage in First Peter a little while ago. Interesting passage. First Peter chapter 1. And it says, chapter 1, verse 22 says, "Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other. Love one another deeply from the heart." Just an interesting little nugget there in First Peter. He uses some language that is rather scandalous, and to speak like that in evangelical circles. Now that you have purified yourselves. And how did they purify themselves? They purified themselves by obeying the truth. And some folks might say that, well, obedience to the truth is simply trusting in the finished work of Jesus on the cross. But he says, by obeying the truth so that you have sincere love for each other. Love one another deeply. So it seems like the obedience to the truth that Peter has in mind here is sort of a practical obedience. It's, loving your neighbor as yourself kind of obedience. It's people who have responded to Jesus, responded to his call to follow him and turn from their sins, and so have purified themselves. And just one of many, many passages around the New Testament that emphasizes our responsibility in this. Mark S. Hello, Mark. Thank you for saying hello. Do we know each other? Are you a recent subscriber? Anything you want to talk about, Mark? I came across your channel last week and have appreciated some of your content. Thank you so much. Thank you for the encouragement. Appreciate you coming on and saying hello. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to discuss, or was there any content that you were concerned about or didn't agree with? Or okay. Thank you, Mark. All right, we have 4 people here. Is there anyone who would like to chat about anything? Anything on my channel that has been sort of that you might want to talk about, have questions about, concerns about, objections to anything that I've said, anything like that? Well, until someone says something, maybe I'll talk a little more about First Peter. Just a wonderful passage. First Peter chapter 1. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. What a simple idea. And it just sort of came alive for me again a little while ago as I was reading it. That the resurrection of Jesus, we have new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. That his resurrection makes this new birth and this new hope, this living hope possible for us. The fact that this man rose from the dead a finite time ago, a finite distance from here on this planet, he rose from the dead, and therefore everything he said and everything he claimed is true, is confirmed, and is vindicated. And we know that this life is not all we have, and can freely give up our lives to serve God and our neighbor. What an awesome reality. Okay, good fruit tree. Hello. It's nice to meet another in Christ that is following the ways of God when it comes to marriage permanence. I too have been made a eunuch for the kingdom, became one. Can you explain the difference? Okay, thank you so much for joining. Good fruit tree. Okay, when you say, now I'm not a Bible answer man, just so everyone knows. I can do my best. So you say you've been made a eunuch for the kingdom. Can you explain the difference? What do you mean? Explain the difference between what? Sorry. Explain the difference between the eunuch. Okay. Explain the difference between a eunuch, like someone who is made a eunuch, and someone who became one voluntarily. Something like that. Okay. Yeah, the difference between a eunuch who was made a eunuch and someone who became one voluntarily. That's a fantastic question. Yeah, I could only speculate about it because Jesus didn't really unpack that in detail for us. Let me just open up to the passage. By the way, if an elderly man barges in unannounced and starts talking to me, that is my dad. I live with my dad. He's 85, and so that could happen. All right, Matthew Matthew 19. Not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born that way. That would be someone who, I think that would be someone who is born and they're just sort of like, don't really have much sexual desire, perhaps, or it could be someone who is born with some kind of a defect so that they don't have sexual desire. This is not something that I have dug deeply into, but someone for whatever reason they were born with some kind of biological, like their sexual desire is basically neutral or not really there. That's what I assume he means. Eunuchs who are born that way. There are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. I'm not sure what he means exactly by that. If he means someone who has been physically made into a eunuch against their will, or because they were born into some kind of, I don't know. There were people who were servants of kings or queens, who were eunuchs. They were made eunuchs. I don't know if Jesus is talking about that, or if when he says eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, if he means people who have been abandoned by their spouses and forced into singleness and celibacy. Except the only problem with that is that Jesus is speaking about people in the past here. And prior to the new covenant, it was not forbidden to remarry. So I guess I tend to think he's probably talking about people who have, for some reason, been made into biological eunuchs. Um, and then he says, and then there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, and that would be people, I think, who are, um, you know, living in obedience to the will of God. Um, and so maybe in a situation where they're bound to singleness and celibacy because of what Jesus taught, um, or something like that. Anyway, yeah, maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking like, no, you got that wrong. Yeah, that's very possible because I have not delved very deeply into this. So there's a lot of people who probably have thought much more carefully and deeply about what Jesus says here than I have. But that's what I tend to think. There's a variety of people on the planet who are single. They are celibate. Some people were born that way, some kind of biological issue, or maybe some people just have a gift from God that they're just kind of sexually, there's no desire there. I think you could talk about that. Then there are people who have been made eunuchs. They've been forced to be eunuchs. They could have been castrated, or and then there are people who choose to live that way because of their obedience to God's commands, and so they're wouldn't like to be eunuchs, but they're living that way because of whatever God or Jesus taught, something like that. That's my understanding. Um, oh, we're down to one. We're down to one person. I think that must be you, good fruit tree. Okay, yeah. Yeah, you were made that way because your spouse chose to leave you. Sorry to hear that. Um, and just wanted to brainstorm because it's hardly preached or spoke about. Yeah. Yeah, it's not something you hear a lot about. One thought that I have about it, though, is that it's a good passage to help us interpret Matthew 19:9, because Jesus, what he says in Matthew 19:9 is so ambiguous and can be understood. It's understood by a lot of people today to mean that you can divorce and remarry. But if Jesus is allowing both divorce and remarriage, then why would he go on to talk about eunuchs? If the exception allows people to remarry and therefore do not have to live as eunuchs, then why does he need to start talking about eunuchs? I guess you could argue that he's just talking about the people who for whom the exception does not apply. But yeah, it's just something to consider. I don't hear people who take the sort of evangelical view of Matthew 19:9, that it allows remarriage in cases of a cheating spouse. I don't hear them talking a lot about people needing to be eunuchs because of Jesus' teaching. That makes sense. It makes sense for him to talk about that if he's saying you cannot remarry, and therefore there's people who are going to have to be eunuchs. Anyway. um, yeah. Anybody else have any thing they want to talk about, or any other? Oh wow, we're up to 7 people. Hello, whoever you are. Jesus saves. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Are you a recent subscriber, or do I know you? I probably know you. Is there anything you want to talk about? Does anybody have any questions, concerns, objections to any of the content on my channel. If you're a more recent subscriber and you want to talk or anything. Chris Iverson. Hello, Chris. I just wrote a book on divorce and remarriage. Okay. That sounds like a serious project. Are you someone who is in favor of the view that I take, or it's on Amazon? It's called Divorce Your Remarriage. Okay, that sounds like you are not in favor of remarriage. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. May God use your book to help people. I haven't read it, so I guess I probably should know what it says first, but are there any differences in our views that you think we should talk about, or something else you want to talk about? For whoever may have just joined, this is just me saying hello to new subscribers, to see if anyone has any questions, concerns, objections for any of the content on my channel. If anyone who's thinking about what I'm saying and wants to talk. All right. Chris Iverson, you said you view porneia as an adulterous marriage. Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I lean towards as well. There, and then you mentioned Clement of Alexandria. There's one RK. Hello, RK. Nice to see you again as well. I can't remember who you are. I'm so sorry. Who are you? I probably know you, right? RK. Glad you're here. Chris Iverson, about Clement of Alexandria, one of my friends, a friend of mine, let me know that there's some, apparently there's some, it's not clear exactly what Clement meant in that quote, that what's the guy's name? Leslie McFall apparently wrote an article about that quote from Clement, where Clement seems to say that sexual immorality is a remarriage. You know, the way he says is a little bit. You know, you got to read it a couple times. And so, yeah, he's talking about a remarriage. But anyway, Leslie McFall made the case that that's not a good translation. It's not what Clement of Alexandria was trying to say. And it's something that I've been meaning to look into at some point to kind of clarify, get clarification on what Clement was saying there. But if that is what Clement meant, then that's a pretty, definitely a home run for the view that you take and the view that I lean towards. Just need to get some clarification on that. All right, we got 9 people here. So yeah, this is a live stream just to say hello to any recent subscribers or anyone who might have questions, concerns, or objections to any of the content on my channel. If there's anything you want to talk about or whatever, here we are. Okay, good fruit tree. Okay, wait a second. Chris Iverson said, Basil the Great has a quote about allowing an adulterously remarried woman to be able to remarry as well. Oh, really? Basil the Great said that like a woman in a remarriage who was not previously married, he was saying that she was free to remarry. Okay, yeah, I'd like to see that. Never seen that quote before, but that would be encouraging to see that. The early church is so strangely ambiguous, or in some cases silent, on this issue, and issues related to divorce and remarriage. It's like sometimes it's really mind-boggling. All right, so let's see here. Okay, I'll be right back. Good fruit tree. I see your comment. Okay, let me just. Chris Iverson's Basil the Great quote in the 370s. He said, "A woman who unwittingly marries a man abandoned by his wife for a time, and who has afterwards been left by him on account of his former wife's returning, has committed fornication, albeit unwittingly. She shall not therefore be denied marriage, though it were better that she remain single." Interesting. So in his view, she's allowed to remarry, even though he thinks it would be better that she remain single. Oh, okay, yeah, I could see why he would say it would be better to remain single. Yeah, interesting. Oh, Devin. Okay, Devin, how you doing, my friend? All right, so okay, Daniel Ward. Hold on 1 second. Hold that thought. Daniel Ward. Good fruit tree. I have another. You have another question regarding first marriage. Would it be considered so if someone do so for a green card but never lived together or consummated or truly leave and cleave? Just wondering. So if somebody gets married just like legally for the sake of a green card, and they never like intended to be married, never made vows or anything like that, or just sort of do the legal, jump through some legal hoops. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would kind of lean towards it's not really a marriage. It seems like that's not a marriage. Some people might like kind of. Yeah, I would just leave that to someone's conscience. I wouldn't tell them one way or the other what. But to me, it seems like if there's no intention for marriage, if it's just a legal hoop someone jumps through for the sake of a green card, and they never actually like make a promise to each other, and never consummate or anything like that, I can't see why that would be considered a marriage that people are bound to. But it's scary talking about this, because you always wonder, what if I say something that God disagrees with? But I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just processing, just thinking out loud. Any thoughts? Got my friend Nick here. Okay, he doesn't want to be on the camera. All right. Okay. Daniel Ward, you said that marriage annulment is in the scriptures. Okay. Could take a guess at what scriptures you're talking about. I assume it's in the New Testament. What do you got? What do you want to talk about? Feel free to post whatever it is you got in mind. Chris Iverson says, it's interesting that the adulterous marriage there is called fornication, too, since fornication is the word porneia, is translated fornication. Okay. Jesus saves. From the text, it appears the audience at the time understood what Jesus meant. Oh, I missed something from Jesus saves. Jesus saves. Devin, you said, Why would God allow such ambiguity to exist as Matthew 19:9 in terms of translation or Erasmus? Did he allow it to test the believer? That's a great question that I've wondered about before. It's like sometimes it feels like there's enough ambiguity, like the scriptures are clear enough so that those who are really listening and who are willing to take up their cross can see, clear enough what it's saying. But there's enough ambiguity so that if somebody just wants what they want, they can find a way to twist the scriptures and, you know, um, come out with whatever they want to be true, you know. And it's just amazing. Like, you can use the scriptures to support. You can use some scriptures at least to support universalism. You can use some scriptures to support. There's enough like ambiguity in the scriptures to support all kinds of things that if you just read it, with an open mind, you're like, well, of course that doesn't seem right. Okay, got some more comments coming in. One guy said something interesting. He said that Paul's epistles are the stumbling block for the lukewarm. That Paul's epistles, like, if you keep your eye on the context, you can see what he's saying. But there's enough ambiguity. They're hard enough to understand that those who want a message that tells them what they want to hear, they can find it in Paul's epistles. And it's like God put a little stumbling block in there to weed out, lukewarm folks who just want to relax and want something from God, but don't want to give him anything or lay their lives down for him. Someone else, had that insight. It was interesting. Jesus said also, if a divorced from their covenant spouse and remarried person stops having, let's see here. Samuel said, I'm having trouble constructing an argument against polygamy, a man with multiple women. The verses prohibiting remarriage are also gender specific. Is there a good argument against it using scripture? I think that there's a couple of things about polygamy. First of all, Jesus, you've heard this before, I'm sure, but Jesus points back to the sort of the Eden ideal of one man and one woman becoming one flesh for life. That's what he points to as he's basically saying, okay, guys, this is what we're going back to. This is how it was in the beginning. This is how it's going to be going forward. And seems to imply one man, one woman. And in the epistles, when Paul is talking about husbands and wives, there's no indication that there's multiple women there. It seems to be one man and one woman, singular. Same in Peter's epistles, as far as I'm aware. Not a lot of. I don't think there's really anything to show that they've got polygamy in mind. But one thing that occurs to me is that if polygamy is allowed, then it's sort of it's kind of hard to reconcile polygamy with the implications of what Jesus said, because Jesus said, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. It's a little weird to imagine that what Jesus is saying is, you're not allowed to divorce your wife and marry someone else, but you are allowed to add someone else to your wife as another wife. Okay, well, if I'm allowed to, it seems to gut his teachings. If I'm allowed to add unlimited wives, if I'm allowed to have an unlimited number of wives, what's the purpose of of forbidding divorce and remarriage. I could understand forbidding divorce, but it seems weird for him to forbid remarriage if I'm allowed to have unlimited wives. What's the problem with divorcing my wife and marrying another if I can marry another anyway without divorcing my wife? It just doesn't make any sense, you know. Samuel, does that make any sense to you? It's a logical argument based on the implications of what Jesus does say, you know, that in light of what he says, polygamy is it doesn't make any sense, you know. Okay, it looks like there's a whole other conversation going on in the comments here that I am not a part of here. So let me get caught up here. Samuel, my relative's wife left him, and if he doesn't recognize the divorce, he doesn't see a prohibition against taking another wife. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Jesus says, also, is a person who is divorced from their covenant spouse and remarried, stopped having sex with their partner, but didn't divorce, let's say, for the sake of children, is that still adultery? All right. Let me read that again more slowly. Is a person who is divorced from their covenant spouse and remarried, stopped having sex with their partner, but didn't divorce, let's say, for the sake of their children. I guess I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Could you reframe the question? Is it adultery for someone who's divorced and remarriage? Oh, okay. If someone's divorced and remarried, and then they stop having sexual relations with their second or third spouse or whatever, they stop having sexual relations with them. Is it still adultery? Are they still in adultery even though they've ceased from having sexual relations with them? Yeah, I think when Jesus says whoever divorces their spouse and marries another commits adultery, I think he's primarily talking about the sexual intercourse. That's what we mean, generally speaking, when we talk about adultery. Biblically speaking, we're talking about sleeping with somebody else's spouse. So when you divorce your husband or wife and marry someone else, you commit adultery because you then become one flesh with that person, and you are committing adultery with them every time that you then sleep with them going forward, unless we're going to assign some new definition to adultery that is not really the primary definition of adultery in the Bible. So I think that there's a sense in which they might stop committing adultery, Devin, if they cease from the sexual relationship, but they continue to live with them for the sake of the children. I think they cease committing adultery in the primary sense, which Jesus is talking about. However, I think just thinking about it, it's like the nature of the relationship is still inappropriate, for the same reason that it's inappropriate for a married man to go and have coffee one-on-one with his, female coworker, because he likes her a lot and is developing, this emotional connection with her, and so they like to go get coffee together on their lunch breaks, because they're kind of forming this emotional bond. Like, they're not sleeping together, so they're not committing adultery in the sort of the classical primary sense, right? But they're developing a bond that is adulterous in a sense. It's inappropriate. Like, the only woman he should have that kind of special bond with is his wife. And when we get married, we're not just making a commitment to only have sex with our spouse, we're making a commitment to only have a certain kind of intimacy and friendship and closeness with them. Um, and so I think, it's still inappropriate to live with, if someone's remarried. I think step one, kind of no brainer, obvious, stop having sexual relations with that person. But at some point, it needs to be handled in a delicate way if there's kids involved. But at some point, the relationship itself is inappropriate, and um, the intimacy that you have, the close friendship that you have, that's not something that ever should have developed, you know. And so I don't think it's enough just to stop sleeping together. Um, but really, what should happen is, if possible, you should seek to restore the relationship with your rightful spouse, and seek to cultivate and nurture that kind of closeness with them. They're the only ones that you should be living with, sharing everything with, developing a close spiritual, emotional bond with. It's not appropriate to have that with anybody else. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. Okay, what else? Okay, so okay, RK said, "What does it mean to you to carry your cross?" I was just laughing before because Devin asked a great question. Jesus saves is Devin. He asked a great question that I was like, wow, I've never thought about that. Let me think about that for a second before I try to. But RK, you said, what does it mean to carry your cross? I think carrying our cross basically means we lay aside we lay aside our own desires. We lay aside, this this way of life that we've had, where it was basically like, you know, primarily about me and what I want out of life. You know, we kind of get into this mode as human beings of what do I want? What do I want to experience? What do I think would be the most enjoyable way to live out my existence here on this planet? And now I pursue that, and along the way, I do some good for people and stuff like that. But really, the you know the goal, the core motivation, the primary the primary objective is to live the life that sounds most appealing and enjoyable to me. And when we take up our cross, we're saying, okay, it's not about me anymore. It's not about what I want or what I want to enjoy. It's about God and the good of my neighbor. It doesn't mean that I don't ever enjoy anything going forward. Yeah, you do. But you don't, like, your life is not about the pursuit of enjoyment. Your life is about the pursuit of God's will and the salvation and good of others. And if you get to enjoy something on the way as you devote yourself to the will of God and the good of others, if there's some enjoyment along the way, great. And if not, that's fine as well, just as long as your life can be useful and a blessing to God and to others. So yeah, you kind of give up the pursuit of happiness. You give up the pursuit of what do I want, and you set your sights on what God wants and what's best for your neighbor. And you actually end up a lot happier that way. But there's great difficulty that comes with it. And I think carrying a cross means, the difficulty in its various forms that comes as a result of obedience and loyalty to Jesus. I am now loyal to him from the heart. I'm obedient to his teaching, and that brings about certain difficulty in my life, and it creates this life in which I am now straining forward, striving forward, and exerting myself for him. And that means putting aside, putting aside my dreams and my whatever, whatever I wanted out of life. Okay, that is no longer important, and now there's something bigger that I'm living for, and that comes with a cost, and it comes with some pain, but it's also involves great joy and a certain deeper happiness. Um, so does that make sense, Jr.? If that makes sense. It's kind of like, I've used this analogy a million times, but like a soldier who goes to war, um, they ship off, they deploy, they go over into enemy territory, and when they do that, they understand that life's not going to be the same going forward. They have to say, they have to wave goodbye to the life that they had been living up to that point, which was, hey, what do I want to do? I just do whatever I want. And life is kind of carefree, and you just kind of do whatever sounds fun to you. Now, when you ship off to war as a soldier, that's all over. And now you've got something bigger than you that you're ready to lay your life down for, and you understand that you are leaving your own dreams behind, and that I think that's a good analogy for what Jesus is calling us to put aside our own dreams and desires, and devote ourselves to him and his purposes. And so that's a very hard thing to do, but you end up much happier, and much more satisfied, even though it's tough. Okay, so Devin, you said, can you please explain the difference between the one flesh in Genesis 2:24 and the one flesh that Paul says happens when one has sex with a harlot? Yeah, I've never thought about that before. I mean, I don't think there is a difference in the sense that in both cases people are becoming one flesh, but obviously the one flesh, with a harlot is is a union that should be brought to an end and repented for. That cannot continue. You have to stop that and move on and walk in obedience. Whereas the one flesh union that a man and his wife has, that Genesis 2:24 talks about, can continue. It's good that they've become one flesh, and they should continue to be one flesh. But if either of them become one flesh with anybody else while they're both alive, that union needs to stop and cannot continue. That's the only thing I got to say about that. All right. Okay. Chris Iverson said, I think marriage happened in Genesis 2:23. Adam pronounced Eve as his flesh and bone. Amen. Samuel, there are a lot of people who come to faith after having a near-death experience and meeting Jesus, but they change so much that their spouse leaves them and then they remarry, such as Howard Storm. Okay. Yeah, that has definitely, I'm sure that's happened many times. Someone becomes a Christian and their lives are transformed, and their spouse is like, not into this. And that's what Paul's talking about in 1 Corinthians 7, 14, 15, something like that. Yeah, the believer is not enslaved in such situations. Let the unbeliever go. And Paul is silent on whether you can remarry or not, but he's not silent in other places, and neither is Jesus. So we got the answer to that question. Yeah, Samuel, about polygamy, it's something I've been wanting to, been thinking about. It comes up every once in a while. You meet someone who is pro polygamy, and they want to talk about this, and and it's something that needs to be addressed. Needs to be addressed sometimes. And so, yeah, I'm sort of trying to develop, a good response to it. That's my best take on it so far. Feel free to send me some thoughts if you have thoughts on it. Yeah, RK, about carrying the cross. It's like it's this really amazing idea that we hear people talk about a lot today, right? But is it happening in people's lives day to day? And my experience is that a lot of times, people in churches are talking about the need to carry the cross, or it's preached in sermons, but then people's day-to-day lives are mostly about whatever I want to do, and the and the lifestyle is quite casual, quite relaxed. There's not an exertion, there's not an intense devotion, there's not you know a daily intentional decision. I'm going to live for Jesus today, and I'm going to find a way to use the time, money, and energy that I've got to make a difference for him rather than to gratify my flesh. And if people were taking that seriously on a daily basis, then the church would just be this amazing beacon of light. But instead, it's this thing that people look at and they're like, well, obviously these people are not really serious about what they believe. That's often what's happening. So Daniel Ward. Okay. Daniel Ward, Genesis 12:18. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me? He said, why didn't you tell me she was your wife? And why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Yeah. So then Abraham takes her back, right? Yeah. That's a great point that I've been thinking about that passage. Because that is an example. It seems like that's an example of, here's Abraham's wife, Sarah. She goes and becomes the wife of Pharaoh. Pharaoh realizes this is not right, sends her back to Abraham, right? So you could use that as an argument to say that if you have entered into an unlawful marriage, like a remarriage, the right thing to do is to go back to your rightful spouse. So Daniel Ward, I agree with you that unlawful marriages, like incestuous marriages, perhaps remarriages, certainly, of course, incestuous marriages, remarriages, whatever else we could think of that are against the will of God. These things, can be annulled in a sense. They're not valid to begin with, and so. Yeah, that's now maybe you didn't bring that passage up thinking that I would, agree with you, and maybe you use that passage in a different way, but to me it shows that remarriages, it could be used to support this idea that the right thing to do if you're in a remarriage is to return to your rightful lawful spouse, which is the view that I think is correct. Okay. Okay, RK. God bless you, my friend. See you next time, I hope, if there's a next time, God willing. A good fruit tree said, is one flesh in regards to sex only or due to marriage? Adam's rib. They are no longer two but one till death, because sex with harlot to be one gets confusing. Okay. Yeah, if I say anything that doesn't sound right, please let me know. I want to be careful with what I say, and okay. One thing that I don't understand is that John the Baptist's rebuke of Herod is that they were still under the old covenant where remarriage was still allowed. I think the issue there, Devin, was not that there was a remarriage, but that he had married his brother's wife. which was not allowed unless your brother was dead. I think. Oh, here is my dad. Hold on one second.
We're with Melissa at 11B in 52 minutes.
Sounds good.
Where's what's his name in there?
He's in there, yeah.
Has he got a resume?
He's already worked for her last year, so she knows he can paint.
Nick worked for Melissa?
Yeah, we worked for her last year.
Oh.
Last June.
Okay. Okay, this is
All right, see you in about 40 minutes. Okay, is anybody still? Oh, there's 11 people here. Wow, that was my dad who came in, and he just wanted to talk to me about something real quick. So I left, and now there are more people here than there were before. So that's interesting. All right, so yeah, I think the issue, Devin, was that he had married his brother's wife, not that there was a remarriage. So his marriage to Herodias was unlawful for that reason, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So Caroline DePorter said, "Hello, Caroline. How do you bring this up to a couple who has remarried that God has not agreed with it?" Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. Samuel said, even when Herodias divorced Herod, she was still considered Philip's wife, even if the remarriage to Herod was considered invalid due to Leviticus. Okay. Caroline DePorter, how do you bring this up to a couple who has remarried that God does not agree with? That is a good question, and the only thing I can say is that I don't think it would look the same every time. It depends on the situation and which, if any of them are open to it. But yeah, I just think with great gentleness and yeah, just to be gentle and also firm on the truth, yeah, I think the most important thing is just humility and gentleness when talking about it, because if it's not done with the wrong attitude, it's obviously, and then that's how it is with everything, But I think I don't think it's I don't think it's hard to figure out what to say, Caroline. It's just making sure to say it in the right way, And I think it's can be as simple as meeting with someone and saying, hey, this is very difficult and very awkward, and there's no right way to say this, but this is what Jesus said, and this is why I'm concerned for you, and this is why I'm bringing it up, and I know this must be very, very difficult to even consider what I'm saying, but this is what it says, and these are the implications, and I feel the need to bring this to your attention, so that you can consider it, because it's a very serious thing. And just what can we do other than just say it? I don't think there's any special formula really, but obviously each situation is a little different, and just need to practice some discernment about what to say and when and how to bring it up. And sometimes one of them, you get a sense that one of them would be open to it and not the other. And I don't know. That's just, I think we just need to rely on God to guide us through those things, through those situations. Probably not a very satisfying answer, Caroline. Mark S., what church are you? I do not have a particular denomination or sect or theological tradition that I identify with. Am I? Okay. Hopefully you guys could hear. Were you guys able to hear me that whole time? Or was I just muted? Anyway, yeah, I don't have a particular denomination that I identify with. I think there's a lot of denominations out there that get certain things right, and most of them get a lot of serious things wrong. And thank you, Rick. And yeah, I don't think there's one denomination we can point to and say there's the one true church or something. I think God's kingdom has spread all over the world. There's wheat in it, there's tares in it, and it takes on different expressions in different places. And yeah, kind of a messy situation. Devin said, okay, thank you, Daniel. Devin said, Matthew 15:9 says, and in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrine commandments of men. Could groups like the Amish fall into this category? Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much every group probably falls into that category to some degree, whether it's Amish making up rules like how many buttons you can have and what color your clothes need to be, and while they kind of, set aside some of the things Jesus said about wealth, and or whether it's the Catholic Church, which, makes up certain doctrines about Mary, or, certain rules and regulations about indulgences or something, while they set aside what Jesus said about love for enemies. It's Protestant churches do it. Everybody does it. And that's kind of like, I think the biggest deception of church history is the devil kind of getting all of these big sects of Christianity to fall into that pattern of let's explain away, let's set aside, let's loosen up on the things Jesus actually commanded that are of most importance. And let's develop all of these, traditions and theology and rules that he never actually gave us. And that makes us feel spiritual because we obey these rules, and we believe these doctrines and this theology that didn't actually come from Jesus and the apostles, but the things he actually said, the things he actually commanded, get set aside. That is the Pharisees. Okay. Anybody else have anything you want to talk about? Got maybe another, 10 minutes or something. Mark, you were Samuel, do you have an opinion on eschatology, pre-trib or pre-wrath or post-trib? I do not believe that there is going to be a pre-tribulation rapture. Do not think that is a biblical idea. And I kind of lean towards. I've been listening to a guy named Steve Gregg about this issue recently, and his views on Matthew 24 and Revelation. And it's very interesting and it's very compelling. And I kind of lean in that direction that, a lot of what Matthew 24 talks about happened in the first century, not all of it, but, and then, there's a case that to be made that a lot of Revelation is really speaking about what happened in the first century and the fall of Jerusalem. And, hold on one second.
You're done.
Okay.
Not sure what to do with that.
Thank you, Dad. Anyway, what I like about that view is that what I think's dangerous about this idea that Revelation is all about the end times, and because it gives people the impression that there's all this stuff that needs to happen before Jesus can come back, and that's very dangerous because I guess maybe it doesn't really matter too much, but I think he can come back whenever he wants. He can come back whenever. He can come back at any point. And one really great point that this guy Steve Gregg makes is that when Jesus is talking about when Jesus is talking about the fall of Jerusalem, that's when he's talking about this horrible tribulation. This horrible stuff that's going to be going on. But when he talks about his second coming, he says it'll be like in the days of Noah. People will be eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage and going about their daily lives. And there's no sense that it's going to be some kind of horrible tribulation and all this, everyone in the church is getting their heads chopped off and stuff like that, but it's just going to be a peaceful time, eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. And then pow, the second coming of Christ comes and people aren't ready for it, just like they weren't ready for it in the flood. Very interesting. Anyway, I kind of lean towards, I guess, what Steve Gregg would call a partial preterism, that a lot of Matthew 24 is talking about the fall of Jerusalem, and that I think in verse 36 or 37, Jesus transitions to now start talking about his second coming, where his feet actually touch the earth again. And I think Revelation, and I have a lot more to listen to about this stuff and a lot more to learn about it. But there's a way to look at Revelation so that a lot or most of the book of Revelation is really about the fall of Jerusalem. But it's in this apocalyptic language that's very poetic and very, like the language of that you read in Daniel or Ezekiel, or like some of the language that Peter uses in his sermon in Acts 2, or the language that Jesus uses in Matthew 24. Using this apocalyptic language to talk about what happened in 70 AD and leading up to it. Anyway, I'm not saying all of Revelation is about that. I think certainly the end of it is about the final judgment and all that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a real firm position on it, and I think however you view it, We just need to be ready for Jesus to return at any time, because he can. And we should be careful about any view that says, oh, all kinds of things have to happen before Jesus can come back, because that can make people feel like, oh, well, okay, it's not time yet. So I can be like that servant, who's unwise and says, hey, my master is taking a long time and coming back. And, just be very careful about anything like that. Jesus can come whenever. Okay, Daniel Ward. So do you? Oh yeah, Mark. So I don't have a real firm view on it. Yeah, Daniel Ward, about the great falling away. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I wonder if that has already happened. If it's been happening for a long time. Yeah, I think if the students of the apostles could look at us today, could look at the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the Orthodox Church, and like, here's a church where Christians think it's okay to go to war, to get remarried, to call the leader's father, to bow to images, to they're teaching stuff like Calvinism. They're sitting in front of a TV screen, wasting the majority of their free time on this silly worldly entertainment. They're I don't know, they're living in luxury, they're pursuing luxury, they're accumulating possessions rather than selling possessions to give to the poor. They're it's like, it looks kind of like the opposite of what the scriptures say in all three churches. In to some degree, in some way, it's just like this falling away from Jesus' teachings. And I think, if we compare ourselves to like liberal churches where they're allowing men to get married, or if we compare ourselves to, the teaching of Joel Osteen, then we might look good. But if we compare ourselves to Jesus and his teaching and his example, if we compare ourselves to what the church was like in the 1st and 2nd century, kind of around then we're not looking so good. And we look like a great falling away now. Just one of these ideas, just this idea that Christians can go to war, that would be like that would be, to the early church, they would think about that very similarly to how we think about the compromise that's happening in some professing churches with same-sex marriage. They're in the same category. It's just the compromise is just as bad. So anyway. Do I disagree with King Henry VIII, like about divorce and remarriage? What do you mean exactly? Rick Gatewood. I also listen to Steve Gregg. He covers the 4 views of Revelation and shares which he tends to believe. He's a very good teacher. Yeah, I don't know everything he believes, and some of the things he's said, about like theological issues made me a little wary, but I think he's very honest, very objective. I like a lot of what he has to say, and especially when it comes to some of these like perplexing passages that are like, what does that mean? He's often just brilliant in what he's got to say. I just appreciate his objectivity and he seems to really do a good job of keeping his emotions out of it. I like that. Okay, Jesus saves. It's possible we won't fully understand Revelation until the events are almost over. Yeah. Okay, what are your thoughts on the COVID injection? I think, I don't think it's the mark of the beast. I don't think the mark of the beast is something, a mark you get on your hand or your head. I think it's, I don't think it's meant to be taken literally like that. Because the mark with which God marks his own people, he says, put a mark on their heads. I don't think that's like, an actual brand on their head, I think it's talking about something spiritual there. So at the COVID injection, yeah, I'm sure there was some kind of. I have no problem believing that there was some kind of get rich conspiracy going on there with Big Farm. I have no problem believing that. I don't know what was going on there. I'm sure there was all kinds of shady business going on there, and it was not a good thing. But I don't think it was the mark of the beast. And I also, if someone thinks it was a good vaccine that helps people, whatever, that's fine. I know people who got it because they thought that it was going to help them, stay away from COVID or whatever. And I don't think that they're probably right, but it's just not something that I'm real concerned about. One of those issues that is not worth fighting or dividing over. All right. Rick Gatewood, call yourself a kingdom Christian. Okay. Yeah, I don't really have. Oh, what's your thoughts on the nation-state government of Israel? Is the establishment of Israel in 1948 fulfilling prophecy? Here's my dad again.
Where the hell is Nick?
He's in there.
Still?
Yeah. I guess I'm gonna go. He's on the phone in there.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to end the stream, and God bless you all. Thank you so much for joining me, and maybe we'll do this again sometime soon. May God bless you.